Welcome back to another Reaper tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about creating reference tracks for your musicians if you only have a score available. So admittedly this is a lot of work, but the result is a recording that should have both a consistent pitch and a consistent rhythmic reference instead of one or the other. Once you've built your click, and I covered that in my last video, you can create a simple chord backing track for your musicians. And this can be as complex as you'd like to make it, but providing the bass notes tends to ground the recordings pretty well if you're on a time crunch and you don't feel like analyzing a full movement of Haydn. So I've gone ahead and made a click track for the first couple bars of Haydn's Symphony 104. And at this point, we can select Insert and Virtual Instrument on New Track. Now, unfortunately, Reaper doesn't come with any built-in instruments like Logic, so these are all things that I've downloaded. And this is something that might be a little annoying about Reaper, but it lets the program itself run really quickly and efficiently. If you have Finale or something like that, you should have a bank of instruments that came with that. So I'm going to use that for now. And we'll select the greatest instrument in the world, the oboe. If you have a MIDI keyboard, that's going to be the easiest way to do this next part. But if not, you can turn your keyboard into a virtual MIDI keyboard by going to View, Virtual MIDI Keyboard. And now it should be playable. Excellent. And if you've built out your click track, I'd recommend following along with the bass, cello, or bassoon parts and entering notes as you go. The rhythm isn't particularly important here, so that's what the click is for. So we're more interested in the chords or just finding some way of grounding everybody on a regular pitch center. So if you're into it, this is a fun harmonic analysis project, but I wouldn't spend too much time obsessing over this part because people are just going to use it to play on top of. Now, if you're skilled, you can do this in real time, but if you'd rather not do that, you can enter MIDI through the MIDI editor. But let's talk about how to do this in real time. We are going to record enable the MIDI track, and that should already be done for you. Then we're going to hit record on the transport and try to play it. And if you're using your virtual MIDI keyboard, you've got to click on that again. So here we go. Okay, so I've already messed up because the keyboard didn't go low enough. But what's nice about MIDI is if you do make mistakes like that, you double click on the MIDI, you can come in here and you can adjust the notes however you'd like. So that's a perfect segue into using the MIDI editor to do this whole thing. The first thing we've got to do is select where we want the MIDI to go. And we do that by highlighting a section of the timeline. We want this to be as long as we're going to need our MIDI item to be. Then click Insert and New MIDI Item. And it'll make an item just as long as your time selection is. Next, we're going to double click on the item and the MIDI editor will pop up. And from here, we can double click in this grid and that will add notes to the grid. And then we can drag the notes out to make them longer, shorter, whatever, and change our notes. You can double click to remove a note. You can change the length of the note and the size of the grid. So you can change a lot of those things. And working in this is kind of hard to read. So if this is not your cup of tea, there is a notation editor as well that you can use that visually represents things a little easier, but it's a little bit harder to navigate if you're using the double click and drag method. So now I'm going to fast forward and actually make this whole track to show you what it looks like in the end. So now we have a track that looks like this, and we're going to be following along with the cello or bass part. Notice how the rhythms don't line up with what's actually there. So now we've got a finished part for the first couple measures, and it's following the cello and bass parts. So let's look at those while we listen. You get the point. Now, if you wanted to go a step further, you could add some of the extra voices into this as well. So at the very beginning, everybody's pretty much in unison or octaves, so that's not the biggest issue. But when we get over here into the third measure, we start to have voices split off. So the viola is staying on A in measure 3. So I will add that in. And that'll help the players stay in tune with each other. So like I said, you can get as involved as you'd like with this, but at the end of all of this, you'll have a reference track that you can export and a click track that you can export, and you can give those out as separate files or together. In our next video, we're going to create a click track and reference chords on a practical example, so we're going to be doing more from this symphony. But for now, I hope this tutorial helped you reap the benefits of Reaper.